campaign that looked at 25 years of children in Scotland and had contributions from organisations all across the sector. So some really powerful voices and some 25 key calls for improving children and young people's lives and families' lives. So a lot of evidence there, and also changing our world. Again, they're hot topics. So that's the key things that change in our world. Our young people's advisory group have asked us to sort of focus on and are looking at as their kind of priorities. So Emmy, if you could jump to the next slide, that would be great. So then we had a lot of data from that early stage of consultation, and basically we spent a whole day with flip chart paper, a lot of data, and lots of coffee, synthesizing all the data and coding it thematically. And from that slightly painful but enjoyable process, 10 kind of key themes emerged. So 10 overarching themes. So Amy, if you want to jump to the next slide, these are the 10 themes that we came up with as part of the manifesto. So you'll see these in the full manifesto. Number 1 is rights and democracy. 2, poverty and inequality. 3, early years. Theme 4 is learning. We've got theme 5, health and well-being. 6, place, space and community. Theme 7, protecting children and young people from harm. Theme 8 is equalities. Theme 9 is environment, and theme 10 is planning, resources and approaches. So Amy, if you could jump to the next slide. So following on from that session, we began work on developing our calls under these areas. And this is based on what we'd heard during the first data collection phase, and also research and evidence from across the sector and from the campaigns that we've run previously. And then we began our second consultation phase. So in between all this, coronavirus hit. And so during the second consultation phase, it was really important for us that we looked at the data that we'd already collected, and we asked members, you know, and internally we reviewed the calls that we were developing and said, hey, what's changed? How has coronavirus changed this? So it also felt quite scary actually trying to develop this in a period of real flux. But as Amy has already highlighted, I think, you know, a lot of the issues were already there in Scotland and have just really been heightened by coronavirus. And so hopefully we've reflected the impact of coronavirus in the final document. But it really tackles the key themes that were already prevalent in Scottish society. So the second phase of consultation, we had another Voices Forum with our members to take back. So they had a very early draft of what we were working on to really see if it chimed with them and their experiences on the ground. So a range of practitioners, but policy-based leads as well, from all across Scotland. We took it back to the Changing Our World group to get their feedback, and also to our board, our staff members who had a really great contribution to developing the manifesto as well. So you'll see the manifesto very shortly, and what we've done is we've made sure that we've included evidence and references pages for each of the themes that we've developed. We thought that was really important to reference the kind of data and reports that we've referred to. So we've got some kind of key statistics there, but also importantly, we've got the voices of children, young people and families represented on that page. And that includes quotes from our own project work, but also quotes from other organisations who've uploaded their report to the Children and Young People's Evidence Bank, and also data that exists more widely. So I think the next slide is our poll. So that's how we've taken an evidence-based approach to develop our manifesto and key calls. I guess what we'd like to know from you is has your organisation contributed to our manifesto development up to this point? So if you could vote now on your screen, that would be really great if you just submit it. And then I think I'm going to have a little, Amy, I think you can see this, but I can't see it. So you could do the big reveal in a minute.
Sorry,
So
I hadn't realised not everybody could see it. Yes, okay, I'll leave it. There's still votes coming in.
great. So yeah, if you've contributed as either an organisation or an individual to the manifesto development, either through the survey, through one of our events, we'd really like to know.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's more or less the votes are slowing down now, so it's looking about 65% haven't and 35% have.
Okay, I think you can share the screen if you just click, because it did come up the result. Fantastic. So it's great to see that we have engaged with lots of you here already, but it also means it's an exciting potential for lots more people to read the manifesto, to engage with all the calls that we have, and really to think about how you can be involved moving forwards. So I think I'll hand back over to Amy, who'll lead us on to the next part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, David. That was great. And yes, and thank you ever so much to everyone that has been involved up to this point. It's really been invaluable in terms of strengthening and giving some credibility to what we're saying. It really does reflect what our members' priorities are. So next, we're over to changing our world. So I shall hand over to Colin, Ellie, and I think Chris maybe as well.
Yep. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Ross. I'm one of the policy officers at Children in Scotland. So I'm really just doing a very quick introduction for Col and Ellie, who are members of Changing Our World, Children in Scotland's Children and Young People's Advisory Group. So as David pointed out, Changing Our World have been involved kind of throughout this process with us. At Children in Scotland, we think it's really, really important to involve children and young people in coming up with policy ideas and directing our work as an organisation, but also going beyond that, looking at how they can be involved in sort of actively campaigning with us. So Changing Our Work, I met with Colin Ellie recently to sort of feedback on the manifesto, on how we'd reflected their views within that, and also then to talk about how we could continue to work together and sort of campaign. And so Colin and Ellie were both really keen that they were not only involved in telling us what they thought, but they wanted to come along to things like this and talk to adults and talk to decision makers about what they think needs to change. So I'm really, really pleased that they've both been able to come along today, and they're going to take a little bit of a different tack each. So they're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that they think it's important that all of us as adults and the people that work in the sector are focusing on. So I think Ellie's going to reflect on some of her own personal experiences, and then Col is going to talk a little bit more directly about the poverty and inequality call within the manifesto. So that is all from me, and then Ellie, I'm just going to hand over to you now.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Ellie Roy, I'm 16 years old and I've been part of Changing Our World for over 3 years now. In this day and age, there are a multitude of different problems affecting children and young people every day. I'll be talking briefly about health and well-being, as that is something that impacts my life greatly. Health and well-being is something that affects every young person. However, some may have more positive experiences than others. For example, the problems surrounding CAM's waiting times. Around January 2019, I was able to recognise that my relationship with food was becoming unhealthy, so I plucked up the courage to tell my mum, and she booked me in to see my GP. We had a hard discussion about how I needed additional support, and so I was referred to CAMS. Within 3 weeks, I was sat with a therapist and we got to work on weight restoration. However, during those 3 weeks, I was still doing harmful things which may have led to irreversible damage both to my body and my brain. What about the people having to wait 6 months for professional help? That is why I think it is ridiculous that around 75% of young people experiencing a mental health problem are forced to wait so long that their condition gets worse or are unable to access any treatment at all. It does not take a genius to figure out that the longer a young person struggling goes without help, the quicker they will deteriorate. So why is it that long waiting times are still an ongoing issue? Lack of funding. It is ludicrous that only 6.7% of mental health spending goes to CAMS. I don't know about you, but to me it makes more sense to invest money at the start of the development of mental health problems. I know firsthand how utterly terrifying it is to open up to your parents or guardians, especially when they may not take you seriously at first. Imagine how silly you'd feel after actively trying to seek help whilst your GP tells you that you're not a priority, or they wish they could help but the waiting list is too long. Too many of our young people are in this situation right now. It is the job of everybody here on this call to speak up on behalf of the young people that the government are failing and ensure that their services are getting adequately funded to the point where they do not feel like reaching out for help is pointless. On too many occasions, I've suggested to one of my friends that they go to their GP in order to get referred to CAMHS, for them to say, "There's no point, I'm not bad enough." That illustrates yet another failure within the service, which is that young people feel they need to get to a critical stage before they will be taken seriously. It is clear that the way this service operates is not working if a child has to be lying on their deathbed in order to receive treatment. Everyone on this call today knows that the CAMHS system is not up to scratch. So what will you do about it? Will you merely sigh at the news of hundreds of children waiting more than a year for CAMHS treatment? Or will you put pressure on the government to rethink its approach to spending on children's mental health services? One of these options requires more time and effort, but will also save young people's lives. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Ellie. And we obviously spoke a lot before this, but thank you for being willing to sort of reflect on your own experiences. That was, I think, really powerful for everybody. And I think hopefully you'll see it's reflected within the manifesto that we have tried to sort of advocate for that early support that so many children and young people need. But yeah, Col, I'm just going to hand over to you.
So, hello everybody, I'm Col and I'm 16. This might sound exaggerated, but not since the Industrial Revolution have the issues of poverty and inequality been more important than they are today. In the face of wage stagnation, a widening class divide, austerity, and a rotten global economic model, it's easy to forget the impact of poverty and inequality on Scottish children and young people. Almost 1 in 4 of Scotland's children are officially recognised as living in poverty, which equates to around 230,000 kids or young people. It goes without saying that 230,000 children living in poverty is 230,000 too many. And the brutal manifestation of this issue lies in the fact that 10% of low-income families in Scotland cannot afford to have their child's friend over for tea for a snack once a fortnight. Listening to these stats, you wouldn't think that Scotland was a quarter or 25% of the world's 6th richest economy. In fact, far from it. And it's for this reason that poverty and inequality is something that desperately deserves our attention. And with the COVID-19 pandemic and March's lockdown, we saw the government socialise the wages of the United Kingdom's workforce and provide support for businesses. But as is the case all too often, children were allowed to slip through the cracks. When it came to education, private schools conducted online live lessons with teachers with incredibly high engagement levels amongst pupils, whereas poorer state schools struggled. With live lessons not an option for many, the sole saviour of children's education for most Scots was the impersonal and detached Google Classroom. In houses where access to the internet could not be afforded, or where children did not have access to technology, a laptop or a phone, they were left behind and their education detrimentally impacted. Coronavirus has offered us a huge opportunity to reevaluate in so many areas of society, from education to economy. And now it's time that as a nation we take child poverty more seriously than we have done before. The pandemic has displayed just how stark society's inequalities can be, but by implementing the policy suggestions within today's manifesto, we can transform our approach to child poverty and properly deal with inequality. Thank you very much. I'd also now, on the part of me and Ellie, like to ask a question of the 93 participants. We're curious to know what you think are the issues that matter most to children and young people in Scotland. So yeah, just the polls there.
That just needs to go in the chat. So we can't get it in the poll function because the polls only do close answer questions. But if you could just put what you think are the key issues in the chat, and then that would be really great. Thank you. They're all starting to come through now. Are you able to see them?
Yeah. Well, climate change. That's a very interesting one, and one that there's quite a clear manifestation of, and in climate marches, I suppose.
Well, that's quite interesting from Diane about the voice of parents is not valued enough. Yeah, I do think parent councils in schools don't hold a lot of weight at all, similar to pupil councils, actually.
I can't keep up.
I know there's so many.
Social isolation in remote areas is an incredibly interesting one, and I think it goes further than that as well. I think that social isolation stems into kind of educational isolation, and what I mean by that is the fact that if you live in a remote areas, the chances are that the subjects that you get offered will be the kind of variety is much less than you would be offered in a kind of city school. I think that's incredibly important when we're talking about kind of rural isolation.
Having a voice from Shona is also very important. Yeah, because I feel like certain types of young people are getting their voices heard, whereas there are other types of young people which are maybe getting pushed under the rug a bit. So that's important to make sure everyone's voices are heard and not just the loudest.
To call Ellie, it looks like things are starting to slow down coming in there. Was there anything else? So you've picked out, I think, some really, really interesting ones. Was there anything else that jumped out at you that you wanted to reflect on, or before Amy moves us on?
Just that one about stigma of being Roma, asylum seeker and refugee. I think specifically Roma, that's the last great form of racism that still exists within our society that you can get away with. So I think that's an incredibly important issue, not just for young people, but for everybody.
Yeah. Ellie, anything else from you?
Juliet Evans talked about digital poverty. Now that's something that's been exacerbated during COVID actually, and some schools are doing it better than others. I know some schools in Glasgow have got laptops for every student, whereas others are sharing their dad's business laptop and stuff like that. So that's something that has been highlighted to us and wasn't really a thing before COVID, I don't think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, guys, with that, yeah, you've reflected, I think, on some really, really interesting stuff that's come in, and there's absolutely loads in there that I think we could probably all work through. And I hope
quite interesting that is not. I couldn't see any mention of Brexit in the chat.
And that's denial. I think we'll go. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that, Elliot and Col, and for your thoughts and observations and reflections, and as always, you get to the heart of the matter, and it's really important to us that what we talk about reflects what the views and opinions and priorities and needs of children and young people across Scotland are. And you're a very good example of how when you include the voices of children and young people, it gives power to our testimony, doesn't it? It gives power to our arguments. So thank you for helping with us today, and thank you for all the input that you've given us into the manifesto so far. And I'm really looking forward to working with you, both and all the other members of Changing Our World as well, and how we make change happen on the back of the work that we've done so far. So thank you, and we'll get everybody to do a little, it's the wave, isn't it, that you do to thank, I think these days, or claps or something, but anyway, you've got some thanks in the chat, so well done. There's one more thing that we're going to ask you to do now, and that is to officially launch our manifesto into the world. And what I need from you in order to do that is simply to give the command for it to go.
Are you ready, Ellie?
Yeah. Wait, do you want to count down?
Oh, yeah, we'll get that in a minute.
Okay, great.
Launch.
Hey! That's it, launched, everyone. And so, in a fantastic display of synchronicity, you will see in the chat that the link has gone in, and we are now online as well. So you can hopefully click on the link and see our manifesto in all its beauty. I'm not going to click on it because that'll probably take me away from the screen sharing. So yes, but it should be up there now. So thank you. We were trying our best to create a sense of occasion. It's quite difficult in these circumstances, and I can't hear the cheering, which inevitably would have happened as a consequence if we were all together in person. But yes, it's fantastic to see it up there, and thank you for doing your best through the chat. Anyway, that's much appreciated. So. We're now going to go into a little bit of the detail of what's in it. The manifesto, which you will see, it has the 10 themes, and there are approximately 33 calls. Some of the calls have sub-calls within them. It's quite a lot. So you'll be pleased to know we're not going to go through 33 calls with you this afternoon. That would probably do you in. But what we thought would be helpful was just to get a sense of some of the calls, just a couple of them, just so that you know what to expect. So I'm just going to quickly go through a few of them with you, just to give you a little flavour. So one that I've decided to pick out, we agreed was a good one to focus on was theme 1, which theme 1 is rights, democracy and Scotland's place in the world. And our call is to give children and young people a say in key Scottish Government decision-making processes, including citizens' assemblies. Our rationale for that is that we've made great progress in Scotland in giving votes to 16 and 17-year-olds, but under 16 still lack many opportunities to have their say formally. Citizens' assemblies, we think, is a good potential for doing this. There was one that was set up to look at Scotland's future place in Europe. Unfortunately, it was only available to people over the age of 16, and we feel that things like this really should be extended to include children and young people. So our call is that we believe citizens' assemblies is one example, and there may well be others, could be extended to include children and young people under 16 if they are given the right support to participate. So you can expect that call within the theme 1 section. Another example of a call is in theme 4, which is learning, and there are lots of calls in this section relating to formal education, but we're also recognising that learning happens in all sorts of aspects of children's lives, and that disadvantage does, as Col mentioned about subject choice, but also there are other forms of disadvantage in terms of learning opportunities for children and young people. So our call is to learn from the Finnish experience and introduce a hobby premium to ensure that all children and young people in Scotland have free access to a hobby or activity of their choice within or around the school day. And this is based on a model that currently exists within Finland. And we are convinced that it is worth a try. We've put the costing of it in the manifesto so you can have a look and see how much it costs to a country that's of a similar size. And we're doing this in the recognition that hobbies are things that children and young people enjoy doing themselves and are motivated and are likely to get more out of it, and that they can support learning, confidence and well-being, but that we need to address the costs that can often act as a barrier and that can result in increasing the attainment gap rather than reducing it further. So you can expect to find that call under our learning section along with some others as well. And finally, and this reflects the people that put climate change in our chat, we have a section on environment, and the call that we've picked out for you today is about improving air quality in locations where children live, learn and play. A school air quality monitoring and education scheme should be introduced to measure air quality, educate children and families about this issue and reduce children's exposure to harmful pollutants. And we do that because we know that air quality in and around schools, particularly in and around urban schools, is pretty poor, and that it's been shown to have a negative impact on children and young people's health and their breathing and lung conditions. And really, we feel very strongly, actually, that the Scottish Government has a duty, and local authorities have a duty to ensure that children and young people, when they're in school and also when they're in other places that they gather, like playgrounds, are protected from air pollutants. So that is one of the calls that you will see in our environment section. So just a little flavour there. What we've tried to do with the calls is we've got some that are more short term and specific, and some that are longer term and more ambitious, but we want to make things that we think are actually actionable. And so hopefully they'll give you a sense of things that we can get together behind it with a hope of changing as well. So to give you a sense of what the manifesto looks like and feels like, we're now going to move on to Angus and Chris from our comms team, who are going to talk about design and communication. And I stopped sharing my screen here, don't I?
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Small, comms manager at Children of Scotland, and as Amy was saying, I'm just going to talk briefly about what our thinking was with the design approach and the comms approach to the manifesto. So you've heard a lot about how we chose the 10 themes, and we're going to have a look at one of the themed sections to illustrate what our thinking was, what our approach was. So what we wanted to do was lead with a big image to capture the theme, and that's what we've done throughout the manifesto. And then on the right-hand page, we go into policy context and the argument to flesh things out and to introduce the theme to everyone. And then following that, on the third page, we showcase our evidence. We also have included links to UNCRC articles and links to our own project work and work of partners. David's talked a lot about the need for this to be evidence driven, so that's really what we've tried to emphasize throughout the manifesto. And then on the fourth page, we've got our calls. So the idea here was that we had a kind of logical progression from introducing the theme to backing up our assertions with evidence, and then culminating in the calls that we're making, what we want political parties to commit to doing. And you'll see that white space, I should say, at the bottom of that page, we're going to be adding supporter logos to the manifesto as people join up, and then publishing an updated version of the manifesto with those endorsements soon. And just a word about the photography we're using as well. What we wanted from the photography really was two things. We wanted photography that would evoke big ideas, the big themes that we're discussing in the manifesto. And we also wanted images which would show how much young people are leading these ideas and are at the center of the change that we're talking about. So this image on the left of the pathway, the bridge, is from Jackie's introduction, and Douglas's comment in the chat about how do we change the paradigm that we're in kind of fits really well with that, because Jackie's talking about how this has been a very difficult time for everyone, but it's also feels like a genuine moment when we can think about changing direction. And then that image on the right is really about how young people are the agents of that change, and they're leading the way. So what we hope is that the photography throughout the manifesto reflects those key themes. I'm just going to bring in my colleague Angus now, who's very kindly sharing his screen, and just to have a quick chat with him about his design approach. So we're looking at the equalities spread here, and Angus, I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about the general design concept and approach that you took for designing the manifesto.
Hi everyone, I'm Angus. I work in the communications team with Chris. I had the great honour of working through the design of this. To answer Chris's question, it was very important just to look at how best to introduce what are sort of multifaceted themes, some of them very complex, and we needed to make sure that there was a way of letting all of the information breathe in a sense. And obviously there's an introduction here and a vision, and the various sort of sizes of typography and the quotations, and of course the photography, which Chris has already touched on, basically need to sort of suggest something to the reader's mind before they really get stuck in. There's something sort of within the, hopefully the visual design language, which gives a sense of what are quite serious, quite big subjects, gets you sort of prepared for them, and then you can sort of carry on at your own speed, whatever your level of expertise in it. Hopefully things look fairly optimistic. We have our brand colors used throughout, which are thankfully and always have been, quite sort of, I suppose, poppy colors, for want of a better word, without sort of overstepping the mark and becoming a bit, mawkish. So that sort of sense of optimism needs to be very present throughout. The quotation, as I say, needs to sort of set you up as you're going along. And there's other little visual hooks throughout. Each theme has its own icon, which has to sort of suggest something of the theme without being overly specific, because of course each theme has all sorts of sub-themes within it, and there's some of them are very, very complex and go off in all sorts of different directions. And at the bottom we have a little sort of stick figure which will move us from this page onto the next one, and hopefully will sort of tie the 4 pages which make up each theme, the 2 spreads, together, and gives that sort of sense of a natural progression, bringing you subtly from the vision through all of the evidence. And as we've heard from David, that's been coming together for well over a year now, and then eventually getting us to our calls. So here we are. Here's our second page.
So Angus, just picking up on that mysterious figure, you put a lot of detail into your design work, and I think everyone can see that on this left-hand evidence and reference page. Can you talk a bit about how you go about, from a design perspective, illustrating the evidence and statistics?
Sure. So I've touched on this very slightly already. Basically, the way to look at it in terms of the sort of design elements is they need to be visual hooks. They cannot dominate. Obviously, there's an awful lot of very important works gone into this, some very sobering statistics, very important calls, and great research. So they need to be there as sort of complementary visual hooks, as I say, without trying to compete with the nitty-gritty with the actual content. And just being sort of good neighbors in a sense. They need to set a scene, as I've said already, and hopefully, give a sense of the subject. So to talk specifically about the infographics here, there's a sort of level to which you can be quite playful and do something quite interesting, hopefully, again, without becoming a little bit too carried away, getting too mawkish. And you find, because a significant part of the population are quite sort of, they're sort of visual learners, often, the raw statistics and the data and the text itself isn't enough, but you get a sense of a subject through the sort of the relative scale of two issues, or the progress, positive or negative, going on. So for example, here we've got local government spending being slashed by almost a third, and hopefully through the use of this sort of playful civic column motif, you get a sense of that sense of things having been cut quite drastically within just one financial year. And again, if you view the other statistic here, about 50% of people in Scotland thinking that the standard of living has fallen, hopefully again there's that very clear sense of one half believe that things have progressed negatively and one half positively, or no change. And it's that sense of the visuals giving you that very clear dichotomy, hopefully, which will give you you know, what you remember if you don't actually remember the statistic and the text with it. But obviously, as I say again, these are just hooks that you sort of hang alongside the more important sort of nitty-gritty. And again, there's the sort of playful character at the bottom, as I've mentioned already, this idea of tying the first part of each theme to the end, and this sets a very clear natural progression. Now, this is a 5-year process we're going through here at Children in Scotland with this manifesto, and hopefully this again just subtly nods to the sense of this being having quite a long lifespan, I suppose.
Okay, thanks, Angus. And in terms of people attending today who might be wanting to take away some learning about their own campaign work, are there principles of design that you've used in this manifesto that you think are important to share?
Well, firstly, I think you need to keep it quite simple. Things need to breathe a lot. There's a lot of information going on here, and you need to be able to take it at your own speed. Everything's been well referenced. There's a lot of research that's gone into it, but that can be taken as you want it. You can follow up all of what we're saying here in the calls, and also in the introduction, and through all of the evidence as well. But if it's an area that you don't have any particular grounding in, you go to the quotations first, you go to the vision, you go to the calls perhaps, and then you sort of work backwards or work forwards at your own pace, hopefully without being intimidated by it as well. And that also brings on to the point that you need to make sure that everything looks very optimistic. There's very serious things going on here. There's quite sobering statistics at times, but the visual language has to suggest that you're up for the fight. You're not so cowed by some of these issues, and you feel that what you're calling for at the end of the journey, the end of that sort of progression, you believe is genuinely achievable. So I suppose all the visual language has to just be good neighbours for all of the more important research and all of the written content which my colleagues have spent such a long time on. And just sort of teasing out what they put in there, so that someone with very, very little sort of experience of any subject can really just get what they need out of it.
Thanks very much, Angus. And I think that what you said about trying to remain optimistic, something that Amy said in her introduction to the manifesto, and I hope that is a message that's carried through it. I hope that brief discussion is useful to people attending today, and if anyone attending would like to have a follow-up conversation with me about their own campaigning work and developing it from a design comms perspective, it doesn't need to be a manifesto, but I'd be very happy to talk to you, and I'm sure that we would learn from you as well. Thank you, and back to Amy.
Thanks very much, both of you. I think it's amazing the amount of detail and thought that they put into the smallest of things. So hopefully you found that interesting in terms of how designers go about turning issues into visuals, and how that can add to the strength of your arguments as well. So do look out for those little details when you're reading it, and I think they just give it that extra dimension and that extra quality, I think, to our arguments. So I much appreciate all the work that, my goodness, you put into it. It's brilliant. Right, I'm going to share my screen now for the little final section of today, which is, we have a question, don't we? And that was, how important do you think design is to conveying a message effectively? So here we go, I mean, we asked this after the presentation. It would probably have been a different, I don't know if it would be interesting to see if we'd done it pre and post, whether it would have changed, whether we've convinced you with our arguments. It looks, yeah, well, do you feel vindicated by those results? I don't know if people can see them yet, or whether it's only when we end the polling that's done. We can probably end the polling now. I think most of the people have voted that are going to. So can people see this? We have 73% saying essential. So pretty much nobody thinks it's unimportant or irrelevant. So that's vindication. And I think it's something that maybe we overlook sometimes. And sometimes it's a resource issue and that we don't have the time and resources and finances to do design. But actually what a benefit it's been to us in having a focus on design over the recent years. And that's testimony to Angus's work, it's testimony to our rebranding, and Chris, obviously, for leading the team, has done a fantastic job in really getting us to up our game in terms of how we convey our messages through word and through image. So thank you both for that. Right, the final section, if I can get this to work, is what happens now. Really that's up to what's up to you as much as it is up to us. We really want you to read our calls, so please do read them on the back of hearing about them today. We want you to consider signing up to the manifesto if you haven't done already. Many thank you to the organisations that have done so already, and we'll share them in a little second. And please do tell your friends as well, so that we're really getting the word out there and getting these calls shared as widely as we can. For us, as I said earlier, this is just really the beginning. This is the document we're going to be using for the next 5+ years. We've got plenty of work to be getting on with. In terms of raising awareness of the calls, you can look out for a special edition magazine in December. Chris, I don't know if you want to say anything briefly about that.
Yes, it's a themed edition of the magazine about the manifesto, and we've invited 10 organisations and individuals to contribute articles talking about why they're endorsing the calls. So that will be out second week of December. Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Great, thank you for that. So yes, that'll give you a bit more detail and a bit more reflection from our members about why these calls are important to them. Our big job, obviously, is to influence political parties in the run-up to the Holyrood elections next year. So that becomes a big task for us now, is to take this and talk to parties. We've had conversations with them already at various different stages, but now we'll go full guns with that. And really, we want to see as many of these calls and as many of party manifestos as we can. And so working with our partners and working with members on that and the influencing side of things will be really important. And then, of course, we will be using this internally to help our work and monitoring progress about how effective we're going to be with all of this. So here are some of the organisations that have signed up already. So thank you to, if any of you are on the call today on this session, thank you so much for your endorsements. It really means a lot to us. And please, if you're organising, there are some, we haven't been able to fit them all on the slide, so apologies if you've signed up and you can't see your logo. You will be fully acknowledged when we've got time to make sure that we've got everybody's details in the manifesto and on our website. We'll make sure that everybody that's signed up to it is acknowledged. Really, it helps us enormously to have people involved, because it adds to the credibility of the calls. There's no doubt about it. Children in Scotland saying these things, you know, we have a voice and a position that helps, but 20 organisations seeing these things, 30, 40, 50 organisations seeing these things, it then becomes very powerful, and then becomes a statement that's across the sector. So if there's ones that speak to you, please do align yourselves to them. What we're saying is that you can sign up to the whole thing if you want to, but we recognise that some organisations have much more specific focuses, so you can sign up to themes. If you prefer to sign up to one theme or a couple of themes, that's also fine. But we're not getting folk to sign up just to individual calls, because that feels like a stage of complexity too much for our brains and systems to handle. So the whole thing or themes, please do. And then the final thing is just to say a thank you. So thank you so much for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed it. And have found a little bit of something to follow up with afterwards. Massive thank you to everybody that's been involved in getting us to this stage, and that's including Col and Ellie and the rest of Changing Our World, and the whole of the Children in Scotland staff team, the board, people that came and took part in Voices forums or Lego workshops or contributed to the START survey, or whose evidence that we've used and incorporated in as well, and the voices of children and young people that we've incorporated. I have to say a specific thank you to Angus, to Chris Small, to Chris Ross, and to David, who have worked so incredibly hard on this over the last year, and particularly over the last weeks, alongside lots of other things that have been going on. I'll ask people to give them a wee bravo or a wee clap if they can, in terms of your little icons and emojis and stuff. They've done a fantastic job. And that is us bang on, 3 o'clock. Wow, done for the day. I hope you've had a good conference. Savenya, I don't know if you want to say anything at the end from Children Scotland wider perspective, but it's been lovely to connect with you, and I wish it could be in person, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Amy. I don't think I have a lot to add at this point, just to say thank you as well from the Learning and Events team for coming along, and for everyone who took the time to speak today, to everyone who helped us with the pre-recorded content. If you haven't looked at that yet, please check out our YouTube link in your program. It's really worth looking at, and we will be sharing recordings of this probably in the next week. I think we're taking a few days off now to relax and celebrate and enjoy this moment with the new manifesto in hand. So, but next week we will be in touch to share information with you, and some of the Menti results from this morning as well. Please do stay in touch with us. We will be running more online events over the coming months, which you can find on our Eventbrite page. So same way you booked onto the event today. And yeah, thanks again for coming. Thanks especially to our sponsor as well, Gillespie McAndrew, who've made it possible that this is a free event for everyone. So couldn't have done it without them. So thanks very much to them. But yeah, most of all, thanks to you for joining us and for being so engaged throughout the day, for your comments and your really lovely messages that are coming through in the chat just now. It really means a lot to us. Thanks everyone. I hope to see you again soon, hopefully in person at some point. But take care, everyone. Bye-bye.